Good.
Here we are.
Okay. So this is, now, I turn this on. Oh, you're all set up here.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all right.
Okay.
I like redundancy
I
because
know.
when one of them goes, the other ones are there.
So this is July 15th, 2009. In fact, that's one of the... do you want to maybe say a little prayer or something to just kind of put us in the space?
Yes. The psalmist tells us, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. May it be your will, Holy One of blessing, Ancient of Days, you who are the one whose arms are underneath it all and are holding us up. We ask that you send your inspiration through guides and angels so that we be of service, deployed to help those people who, with the fear of death, are unhappy about the December of their life. We want to make sure that this is seen as a good harvest month for life, and to this we dedicate ourselves. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. I listened to Graceful Passages several years ago, and I've listened to it again and read it. And it is the most beautiful track on that CD. So I'm wondering, was it like a transmission that came through you? It's so clear and so concise and so simple.
When Gary Malkin invited me to do that, we went to a studio, and in that studio I went and placed myself on the deathbed in my mind, because I felt that unless I would do that, it would be just someone talking to people in a way where I don't want to listen to you. Who's dying anyway, you know? And I felt that if people could hear this from that point of view and rest their mind feeling that they join in this, that would be wonderful. And so I just spoke from that place, and we didn't have to do another take on that.
So it was all just extemporaneous.
It just came.
No, it's extremely powerful and beautiful. It's like a little psalm in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about the December work. I think it's important to define what it is, really specifically, what you want to do in your December work right now, from this point, at this moment, and maybe what you've already done and what's been most challenging. But why don't we start with, how would you describe what is the December work?
Well, I need to go back and talk about October and November.
Okay.
Because it often happens that people, when they get older, don't have the sense of becoming elders. It looks like this is the time when they become redundant population. They don't have anything more to do. They're not anymore, quote, productive and so on. And for many people, this is the beginning of depression, which I experienced myself until I found out that the depression was that I have not changed my life view from the time I had to be very productive and very busy. So I was working my body at 60 as if it was a body of 40. And that just couldn't work. So for this reason, I began to go inside. Then I realized that without having the right kind of contemplative skills, you could never do the work of coming to terms with mortality, doing life review, doing the forgiveness work, and doing the harvesting of life. So that I dedicated the October years, which turn out to be, if you take every one of those 7-year segments, that the first one is beginning from the Feast of Nativity to the end of January, the first 7 years, and the first set of teeth comes out, second set of teeth come in, and we are now moving into puberty at 14. At 21, we have gone through this part of adolescence, and now begins the formation of the adult personality, which goes for the next 7 years to Saturn return and the professional skills to 35. And at 42, we can say, now I'm ready to do my life work. That allows us to do July, August, and September.
What is 35?
35 is a time when our personality has been shaped already. You know, who will you be when you grow up?
Yeah.
You know, by that time, the presentation of self has gone through all the phases of the wild and woolly time and trying out green hair or whatever it is in between, motorcycle, you know, and so on. But when that period is over, we are dealing already with a person who has decided this is how I present myself to the world. And then becomes the vocational preparation and working up the ranks until you get to the place where you can do what you are meant to do. So now we have July, August, and September, which leads to the ripening, the complete ripening. And at 63, we are now moving into the October years. And it's at that point, 63, 65, these are not exact times, that people have to start thinking about retirement and what to do. And very often they haven't got a clue, because in this society there isn't a model available of who we are to become during those years when we are no longer fully productive. You look at the AR...
When you say we're no longer fully productive?
No, when the societal picture has us at that time, you know, Social Security kicks in and so on and so forth. Then you look at the advertisements in ARP Journal and the other publications, and you get to see that they offer you the cruises you couldn't afford when you were a teenager, but they want you to behave as if you were still a teenager, you know, go swimming and use Viagra or Cialis and enjoy life that way. Hardly anybody gives you a model of how to become an elder. Now, Jung asked the important question. Am I talking too fast?
No.
Jung asked the important question, why is it that life gives us more years after we've finished with reproduction and so on? And the answer is because Earth, Sophia, our mother, needs us to pour back into the cultural pool what we have learned, our wisdom and our experience. Now, if this is our task to become wisdom keepers and so on, then it makes a great deal of sense to learn how to do this effectively. And the most effective way we can do that is to learn how to travel inside of ourselves. Because I have to visit the past, which often is uncomfortable. I have to also ask myself, just as in the fourth step of the 12-step program, make a very real reckoning of what my life is about, to whom do I have to make restitution. All this is difficult work and very often not possible to be done in solitude. People have to learn the skills to be able to do that, and if possible to have someone to be a doula for this work, to accompany you in
a doula being?
A doula being a midwife, as it were, for that. And when we talk about life coaches and so on and so forth, in the spiritual eldering work, we trained people to be able to help people, and we have a workbook that takes us through the various kinds of stages and asks us to be really scrupulous in assessing our true being, who we are. Given that we have done this work successfully and we are now have become an elder, then we can serve and give back to the planet as elders.
Mm-hmm.
And I would look at Jimmy and Rosalind Carter
Mm-hmm.
as being poster children, as it were, for this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
They have completed what they need to do. They're still active in their churches. They're giving back to the best of their ability. And I think that's what we are needed for. In fact, if we were to pay attention to the founding fathers, we would choose elders who have already seasoned and done the October work and put them into the Senate. Nowadays, you can be a senator only if the lobbyists are going to give you money.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they behave, as we have recently seen, is not necessarily that these are people who are elders who know what to do with their time. But given that we could get a council of elders this way, from the lowest local level to other levels, to work together as wisdom keepers and as helpers and as mentors and so on and so forth, that's the work of November. But even
Which
that,
is roughly what age?
I would say that if we go from 63 to 70, then beginning at 70, we are doing the November work. If we go to 77, that's the time to start thinking about the December work.
Okay. So what is the November work?
To give back to the world as elders, as people who have already become, have accepted themselves and have been accepted by others as elder wisdom keepers. Look,
That's kind of a new age term, elder wisdom keeper. Can we think of something else can we think of some other descriptions that would maybe have a broader ability for people to relate to them?
indigenous peoples.
Uh-huh.
And if you were to look at the women, the elder women among Native Americans, they're the ones who are really behind the chief, as it were, Sheshila Fam. And you would have to say, find the older woman and with their wisdom. And I want to say that very few, because in Judaism we've had such a difficult break through the emigration and not discontinuity between the Bubby wisdom, and they were the ones who were the carriers of the knowledge. Often it was psychic knowledge. It was, as you can talk with Reb Nadia about.
Who's Reb Nadia?
Rabbi Nadia Gross,
Mm-hmm.
and she is a carrier of her grandmother's wisdom and the skills and the function of doing that. And but this hasn't happened for many people, and in fact, very often there was a dissing of that kind of knowledge. People would say Bobbemeises, there's grandmother tales, and it's not important, but that was an important function.
Old wives' tales.
Old wives' tales, right.
Yeah.
If you go, on the other hand, to the men's side, and you would see that beginning with the Bible, Moses couldn't run the whole show unless he had 70 elders with him.
70?
70 elders. They were chosen from all the tribes, and the number is again that kind of a number.
Yeah.
That's a magic number. In Rome,
77, did you say?
70.
Uh-huh.
In Rome, they had the senators, and that was the beginning of the understanding of elders. In the church, you have church elders, and if you look at the early church, as it is in the travels of the apostles, there you find that most of the churches, the early churches, had elder women in charge rather than the men. When the Vatican became what it was after Emperor Constantine, it shifted over to a large extent to the masculine side, and the women's side was ignored. And
With Constantine, was that?
yeah, that's where you get Constantinople. This was a town in Greece where he was the emperor of the whole empire, the Christian empire.
And women were what?
Gradually removed from leadership and given auxiliary tasks, as you could see that the staffing of hospitals and schools and so on and so forth was given over to the various kinds of sisterhoods.
Yeah, I want to ask you because not all older people are wise. And I find that, I had one grandfather that was wise, but I had three that were not grandparents. And often one feels in the presence of, I mean, it's like at any stage of life. Not everybody has skill and wisdom. So there's kind of a prejudice. One tends to feel that as people get older, they get less interesting. They are less interesting to talk to, spend time with. So there's a prejudice that we're also that is rooted in experience. How do you how do you find the true wise ones and the ones who, like, all their lives probably didn't have any particular insight or wisdom?
When we began this work,
Yeah.
we tried in Philadelphia to go to the JCC and talk to the Golden Agers.
Right.
Only 6 of them came because it was not interesting to them.
Uh-huh.
At one point, one of my students asked his mother whether she would want to join, and she said, "I'm not ready to die yet."
Uh-huh.
Okay. Then one day I met her because he asked her, "Then what would you like to learn?"
Mm-hmm.
How to get the respect I deserve.
Uh-huh.
That was wonderful. So I met her, I opened the door for her, I gave her a chair, did all these kinds of things for her, and then she said, "Stop fussing about me." And then I said, "You will never get the respect you deserve if you don't let people respect you." So it's, very often that sense, I can do it by myself, I don't need anybody's help.
Mm-hmm.
Ramdas describes how he was embarrassed to be offered an elder ticket on a train.
Yeah. A senior. Right.
A senior ticket. So I think this is true that most people aren't going to do that. But now let me go back, and I don't say this as to blow my horn.
Mm-hmm.
But how come that more people feel a certain kind of attraction to me?
Because they look at you as exceptional.
So I want to
Yeah.
say,
They look at you and say, "That's how I want to be when I'm older. This is a
Okay.
model." Okay.
now, being a model, I ask what's underneath there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has something to do with the way in which there's a broadcast that says, my wisdom isn't only for me.
Mm-hmm.
And a certain kind of carrier wave of love, if that's not there, it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
People have to feel that this gift of time, spending time with them and so on and so forth, is something that they want, that it tastes good, it gives endorphins to them. And at the same time...
And this gift of time, spending time with an elder.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and when that happens, look, I experienced that with Gerald Hurd, I experienced that with my Rebbes, I experienced that with good people who were unconscious, maybe, of the fact that they were looking for someone to give over their experience before they died.
Mm-hmm.
I think the greatest grief that people have is so much life experience, and it's going to go and rot in the grave, and it won't be given over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I like that phrase, when the street preacher says, "Are you saved?" To be able to say, yes, I'm being saved. Right now I'm being saved. The camera is helping us to be saved. And every time there is this kind of an encounter, I'm being saved.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, people would like to make a little more explicit that goodness that comes from such a person. And so only yesterday, a man came with his daughter and asked that I bless her before the bat mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful to sit with this young woman separate. Told the papa not to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to talk. what would you like to be able to do after bat mitzvah you couldn't do before?
Uh-huh.
Empowerment, yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of a blessing would you want?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you light candles yet?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to begin at bat mitzvah. Here's a set of candlesticks with
Mm-hmm.
a couple of wax candles you can start.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a gifting
Mm-hmm.
that happens. And so then the blessing that she asked for had a matrix on which to rest, because there was a loving exchange. And while she felt strange at the beginning, the hug that I got before she left said something else. Okay? So I think the problem is not that the people are stupid. The problem is, look, go to Florida.
Well, but first, before we go there,
Yeah,
what did she finally ask for a blessing?
that's her business.
Okay.
Okay. No, I really, they come, look, I can talk about this a little bit, but not tell what
Yeah.
she asked for.
Mm-hmm.
She is still at the end of middle school, driven completely by the consensus of the other kids, feeling already inside of herself that she has something that is not part of the crowd, and wanting to have that plant inside of her watered. It's in a good way in which I could say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's lovely. But you started to say, so you go to Florida and you see...
And you see that each one looks at the other and says, how should I behave?
Mm-hmm.
And the clothes they wear.
Oh, you're talking about South Beach, the young people,
No, the older
older ones.
They look at how should I behave, and so they go to Pumpernickel for breakfast, and they eat until they can't handle anymore, and then they talk. The people talk about their children and grandchildren. There's nobody there to model for them,
Mm-hmm.
and I would swear from the encounters that I've had that they're bored.
Mm-hmm. And we're bored with them.
Huh?
People who are bored are boring.
Yeah.
We are around, or being around them. That's what I was trying to say. Is boring. For me to spend time with my mother right now, it could be boring. I'm trying to make it something else, but
Right. Fried green tomatoes.
Yeah.
Wonderful example. Tawanda. And she is still alive and excited about things. Then there's this other woman that as she goes to talk to her, who's always dragging her in, please sit with me, and then tells the same old story over and over again. She doesn't know that she doesn't remember. And they're sort of human wrecks, in a sense, warehoused. So I want to prevent that. Once I came at a warehousing situation for indigent people. So the government of the city government kept them going. And I came in and started to talk about eldering. They wheeled in a black lady who was sort of like out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I began to talk about the needs that elders have, to be understood, to be loved, and to be able to do the life review, and she would start saying, tell it as it is, amen. All of a sudden she was alive, which is a way of saying that if I can wake up the limbic system of people, they won't be boring. It's recognizable that when a person is in their limbic place.
Well, what is the limbic place?
We have hardwiring in our neurology. The most basic brainstem is the reptilian that says, this is my turf, and is always afraid, and is in fight and flight, and wants to protect, this is my mate, this is my this, my that, okay? And that is so hardwired that it's the fastest neurology. The moment someone gives me a crooked look that I don't like, then I'm ready to what's going on here? Yeah? People used to say like this, when you say, hey Jew, and you don't smile, I'm afraid, okay? Like that funny story about the guy who was on a train in Texas, and the guy says, are you a Jew? And he gets so scared. And he says, yes. He says, please, we need you for $1 million. So
that's the reptilian. And then
that's
what
the
comes
reptilian.
after that?
Then comes the mammalian thing.
Uh-huh.
And mammals are a herd. We love to celebrate, to jump, to dance. When you look at most synagogues and churches, and you can go on to all kinds of societies of that sort. When I first come in, my reptilian says, everybody's looking at me, I don't know who I am, I'm afraid, and so on and so forth. And if there's a good greeter there, they say, welcome, it's a pleasure. But then already, look at Jewish renewal services, and you see that it's happening. People greet you, they look at you straight, and you're happy. Then starts the singing and the dancing and the celebration. And most churches will say, sing unto the Lord a new song, and then they'll say, don't you dare. Right? So behind it is going to be conforming to the outer picture rather than eliciting from people their celebrative thing. And when Matthew Fox was doing the raves, technomass as he called it, and so on and so forth, he wanted people to really jubilate and celebrate and so on and so forth. And most people don't understand it. They like the words, but they don't. They're actually afraid of the limbic exuberance.
So what is the limbic again?
The limbic is the way in which we are mammals and like to be in herd and like to be excited in we feeling, to be in the sharing thing. So when I say the only way to get it together is together, that's the slogan of the limbic system. So most of the people have gotten, I'm talking about run-of-the-mill old folks, haven't experienced the limbic for a long time. And so you see them sometimes for a chasana, a wedding, when you give out the last daughter and they dance around you and say, Hai, dai, 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 di, da, di, da, da, da. Me zinke ausgegeben, the last daughter, I'm free of that. Or Theo Bickel sings 80 und 70 sie. He is 80, she is 70, and they still love each other, and so on and so forth. That is allowing for the limbic at there. But most of the people are in quiet despair at that point.
Depression. Yeah.
Depression, and that gives a message to the body, turn off. And often the only joy that they have is to share the organ recitals with each other. My bladder isn't doing so well. My eyesight is failing, and so on. There was a play by Paddy Chayefsky, The 10th Man, that had a story about how the old-timers meet in the synagogue, and the only fun that they have is if you come with me to visit my plot in the cemetery, I'll come with you tomorrow and visit yours. So that I'm dealing with the limbic. There's another big problem that leads to depression, and not for everybody. It depends to what chakra people are going, The limbic goes to the first 3 chakras. Often when it is safe and the reptilian doesn't complain, it can go to the 4th chakra and be loving and so on. Some people who are in Alzheimer's or what we would call retarded have a way open 4th chakra and very loving at that point.
Yeah, that's where my mother's at.
Yeah, they may have been bitches before.
Yeah, exactly.
But at that point, that's where they are.
They call it, because I wrote a piece about that, they call it pleasantly demented, meaning their memory is gone, but they're in the now happy, like they've never been. It's shocking, because like you said, it could have been, my mother was a complainer all her life, and nothing was ever good enough, and critical, and we called her the send back queen, because in a restaurant everything was sent back if it wasn't exactly perfect. Now she eats what's in front of her. She likes it. You ask her how she is. I'm fine. I feel wonderful.
And grateful too. There is a more grateful thing coming up. But that, when you say it is demented, so I want to go now to the mental. Because there are some people who are not demented. But as long as we go to Camus and to Sartre, we get to the place, there's no exit, everybody has to die, alienation, it's useless, the universe is stupid. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, toward the end of her life, was saying, all my work is stupid, it's worthless, and so on and so forth. And somebody pointed out to her, you are doing exactly what you have described is going to be, that this is one of the phases you go through. What is missing for these people is that they have not had a chance to do their philosophical homework.
Which is?
Well, now we're going to spell this one out. Philosophical homework, you want to look at the thing here? I don't mean academic philosophy, but was this trip necessary? What's my life all about? I don't see any purpose in having lived. And so, what's this whole business about the universe and so on? So people have to do some figuring out in order to die well. We're going back to the Bokononian thing, to be able to say that I was mud and now I was conscious and I'm going to be mud again, but I can't wait to find out what my Wampeter was. That's, in other words, my purpose on life, and to find out all the people who were in that play in which I starred.
And this is the Kurt Vonnegut in Cat's Cradle.
Yeah, and that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I believe that when people get older and they don't do that philosophical homework, there is a depression that comes not from the reptilian being afraid or from the limbic. It comes from the cortical, which is now saying, I haven't figured this out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've gone far and wide.
Yeah. And one more step.
Okay.
Okay. That's important. Otherwise, we miss the fourth one. There's still another level.
Oh.
And that's the key for the December work. I'm saying that if I had done all the homework, the philosophical homework.
So let me just clarify. Is the philosophical homework trying to find out what your life has been about and what was the purpose and the meaning?
Yes, because
I don't know how anybody ever arrives at that.
Well, that's where we go to Viktor Frankl. You don't arrive at that. That's why he's saying, I don't know I'll find out what my Wampeter was, right?
Yeah.
We don't know that, but there's something else that we do know. Look, if I go with Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he talks about the evolution of the planet to go from the lithosphere, where it's a rock, to the biosphere, where it is life.
Yep.
And that is plant life and animal life. And then it gets to the noosphere, where the thing is consciousness and the communication of consciousness. And we are right there as far as the world history is concerned, in such a way of connectivity that even in Iran at this point they can't stop the Twitter and the other thing, because we're all connected. That is an amazing thing. Mm-hmm. But then he says there's another phase to which it'll bring us, and that's the divinization of the planet. And so the homework is to be able to recognize that my specific personal history has a place in the history of consciousness of the planet. And if I think that my life is independent of the planet, like so many people who are having an epistemology, a way of trying to understand the world, but it was not a participatory epistemology, which means as they thought about the world, they didn't count themselves in as participating in that life.
Right. The non-dual teachers, like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti, would say there is no purpose in life other than being and becoming aware and becoming conscious. And
that's not enough purpose.
Well,
I want to say.
But anyone who's looking, because if you look for what was the purpose, what was the meaning, we all come to, it was all a bunch of sand.
Not true. Mm-hmm. Not true. This is where that's my big criticism of what does he call it? Enlightenment today.
Andrew Cohen,
and
Kenneth Wilber.
Kenneth Wilber is different.
Uh-huh.
Krishnamurti and Eckhart Tolle. All these people are only seeing the individual. If you start, and that was my criticism of Muktananda, when I asked him this question about what about the social element. This is where Judaism is very good about this, and Christianity, at least the way in which it was conceived as being the ecclesia, the gathering of all the people who are saved and working together for the world and so on. There's a social element. And when I start asking myself from Gaia's point of view,
what is Gaia?
Gaia, Mother Earth, the planet seen from outer space, that great revolution that took place when we first saw the picture of the planet from outside. It was as if, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the brightest and most beautiful of us all? And Mother Earth getting the feedback, you're gorgeous, you're blue, you're wonderful. And from that time we got into a lot of stuff that had to do with ecology and so on. And there is an awareness. In this awareness, you and I are two cells communicating with each other with the purpose of communicating further, and we have the extension of our nervous system in this camera here, right? And we want to be able to share with other people. Then if I say, I am satisfied to have been used by our Mother the Earth, deployed for a lifetime, to pick up wisdom from my tradition and many other traditions and carry it further and give it to other people. What do you mean meaning? It's great.
Well, with yours, it's very clear. You started a movement, a complete. With yours, with mine, it's not so clear. With most people, it's not so clear.
Well, let me say, that's what you say because you don't see yourself on Earth from the outside, okay? When I go back to the first time we met, was it in Long Island or someplace?
Yeah, I took a train out to see you.
Yeah, so I had a sense right away that in my Yiddish, das ist ein Mensch. It pays to spend time because that person is not wasting their consciousness. So the issue is going to be that this is, if I were to say, what's the missionary job that we have to do, is to wake people up that we are not the top of it, but we are integral. That's where I come back to Ken Wilber, and who's talking about the integral vision, and he is not like Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, I have a harder time with Ken Wilber.
I tell you why.
Because he's so cerebral.
That's right. He speaks of the eye of the spirit, the eye of the mind, and the eye of the body, and the eye of the heart isn't there. And I've told him that.
Yeah.
And But you know what? Each person works with the vehicle that they have been given. He is a cerebrotone and I'm a viscerotone. And it makes a big difference.
Sort of. You're both.
Yeah, but I think I wouldn't do my cerebrotonic stuff if my viscerotonic thing wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Who says that people make love only with their bodies?
Would you care to elaborate on that?
Huh?
Elaborate on that.
That's very, very clear that when you're saying that you didn't have the same and I start feeling that you're a mensch with whom to talk, with whom to share, and underneath all the words there is something goes from my heart to your heart, and vice versa. So who says that that it's only genital, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I want to go to the fourth part. That is very important, you know.
The fourth part of what? I'm a little lost.
All right. We talked about the reptilian, the limbic, the cortical. Now
we didn't talk about the cortical.
Yes, we did. Because we were talking about the philosophy, the mental. That was where the cortex works this out.
Okay.
And in order to round this out...
These are the Now, these four things are the parts of the brain or the parts of...
Parts of the brain.
Okay.
That's how we are hardwired. You're going to find Jung talking about sensation, feeling, reason, and intuition. And intuition is what we're talking about now. And what was his name? Larry Dossey was just here, yeah? And he was talking about, what does he call it? The hunches, the...
Instinct?
No, he had another word.
I wasn't there.
It'll come. See, this is the problem for a mental person, that his hard drive is slow. And it doesn't come up with the... I know exactly what I want to say, and the word isn't there. But that's something that older people have to make peace with. Now, I want to go back later on to other people who may not have the great thing in the world. We'll go to that in a moment. Okay.
But they haven't left. They haven't left a legacy as you have, or like Rachel Kessler, who's struggling so now. She has a legacy, what she created, that's going to continue after her.
Yeah.
You have a huge legacy that's going to continue. But there are those of us, the run-of-the-mill, average daisies.
So I want to talk about that, but you got to let me finish the fourth
I'm going to make a note.
Okay. I won't forget.
So the four parts of the brain. We did the limbic, the mammalian.
The limbic is the mammalian. The reptilian, the mammalian or the limbic, and the human, the cortical, the mental. Now when we start, premonitions was the word that I was looking for.
Hey, look at that. Didn't take that long.
So that part, which is not located in how would I put it? It's non-local and it's non-temporal. And to hear an MD, who has paid his dues to the AMA and talk about non-local and non-temporal experiences, and where do they come through? And that's where Jung is talking about the intuition. And in December, we don't need to do as much of the mental work if we have done it, a lot more about the intuition. And the intuition does two things. A, it tells us that I am not my body. My body is a wonderful vehicle. I love it. I'm glad that I have it still. But I'm not my body. That's that intuition. The deeper I go with the intuition, say, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? I finally come back to say I'm God. This is a hard one because there's so much anxiety that builds up before you can even say I'm God. Because always we are afraid people will say, then why do you let the world be in such a mess and so on and so forth. But that's a misunderstanding of that, you know. I'm divine. I am of God in this way. And then I can say, like I told you, dear God, do you want to be Zalman another day? I'll give you a good ride. Okay, that's a whole other story. Now, if I want to go and say, why was God deciding to be me?
Can I just interrupt for
Yeah.
a second? When you say I'm God, do you mean I am divine? I am that I am part of what the eternal,
Yeah.
whatever? Because there are people have different understandings of God.
I don't think I want to deal with that.
Okay.
I wrote a book.
Yeah.
And the first chapter says, "Oi, what a word!"
Right.
Men, you can't give.
I just read it.
You can't give other people their God stuff. That's why the deep meditative. This is where I go back to Eckhart Tolle and to all these guys. You know.
They say I'm unconditioned awareness, or whatever they want to call it. Yeah.
And that's necessary, but you have to do your homework before you go there.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a family and you have children.